You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
Welcome. You are listening to watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. With us today is our good friend John Rubino, dollarcollapse.com. We got a lot of things to talk about here, John. We got an imploding White House, government, Western civilization as we know it, and the beginning of the petro-ruble, if you will. Will it be the first gold-backed currency? But let's talk about our good president. He called for regime change of Russia, a nuclear power, one of 6 or 7 nuclear powers that we know about in the world. And this was the supreme act of insanity that immediately led to the White House trying to roll it back. The press corps, the intelligence agencies. I mean, this might have been too big a red flag to wave in front of Putin's face here.
Well, yeah, Biden has always been gaffe prone. That's been true throughout his whole, like 90-year political career. The guy's been around forever, and he's always put his foot in his mouth. That's just been part of the endearing side of his personality when he wasn't in charge of anything. Now he's in charge, and his mental decline is exacerbating his tendency to say weird stuff, because weird in a senator is one thing, but weird in a president is American policy. When the president says something that has the force of policy, and he's saying just crazy stuff lately, crazy, dangerous stuff lately. And so, hopefully, nobody takes it seriously. And I think it's a little bit like it was with Trump, where he could say pretty much anything. And everybody was like, oh, that's Trump. It's okay. We're not going to have a nuclear war just because he said that. And, this other thing isn't going to happen. And so hopefully the world is seeing this the same way, that, okay, Biden can say anything he wants to, but that is not actual U.S. policy. It has to be filtered through his people, who then walk it all back. So it's embarrassing. And hopefully it's just embarrassing, and it's not existentially dangerous, because if we took his words seriously, we would be trying regime change on a nuclear power, as you said. And
it worked so well in Iraq, right? And in Afghanistan.
Well, I think it would be a whole different thing if we tried that with somebody that had multiple ICBMs that can hit all of America's big cities. We'd be talking about extinction level event there if we actually tried that. So hopefully it's just an old man rambling incoherently in the last few years of his life, and not American policy being made when he says these things. I don't know where it goes from here in terms of American policy. Clearly, we're going to see a big change in the midterm elections, where barring some kind of miracle. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. It looks like now that the Republicans will take back the House and the Senate. But what is that? 6 or 7 months away, and 6 or 7 months that's plenty of time for the Republicans to snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory, because they're just dumb enough to do something that would cost them these midterm elections that it looks like they can't possibly lose. But barring Republicans being Republicans for the next 6 months, like if they just shut up, don't do anything until the midterms, they will take back the legislative branch of the government. And then we're basically paralyzed, which in today's world is about the best you can hope for. A federal government that does nothing causes relatively little damage. And so it's like that old saying about somebody who's, I forget, a famous guy used to sleep 11 hours a night. And he said, I don't get anything done, but I don't cause any trouble either. And, it's like that with the paralyzed government. And so that's liable to be what we see, unless your theory of the Democrats replacing Biden somewhere in the near term comes true. And then all bets are off, because that process is going to be messy, to say the least.
Well, here's the thing. I think it's the actual people running the government are going to replace them, and they don't care about parties. Parties are just labels, like male and female. It's just a label. It doesn't really mean anything anymore. Used to once upon a time, but now, hey, you can self-identify. So parties mean nothing. I think the article I read, and I can't remember where, and I saw it, it made a lot of sense, is that everything is just crumbling, destruction of everything. You got inflation, you got wars breaking out, you got $5, $6 a gallon gas. I mean, the Republicans are campaigning in gas stations, John, as people fill up, and then you see those stickers on the pump. I mean, I don't go to gas stations anymore. I have an EV, but I've seen the pictures, and there's a picture of Joe Biden pointing to the price of gas saying, I did this. And then you got them worrying about the green economy, and it's just like everything is a giant dumpster fire. I don't know if you caught that, but our governor DeSantis said Florida's doing great because people are fleeing the dumpster fire states, but the country is a dumpster fire. And the elites realize that if everything collapses, which maybe was their game, they're going to lose their goodies too, especially. So now, supposedly, the plan is on to get rid of him and Kamala. They don't care who they replace him with, just somebody who hopefully, isn't wearing Depends and doesn't belong in the Happy Acres nursing home.
Well, I see what you're saying, but that's not easy to get rid of a vice president and a president at the same time. And then when you do that, the next person in line is Nancy Pelosi, who might not be an improvement even in terms of mental acuity. Yeah, what is she, like 97 years old or something, and she's not all there anymore either. So then you got to get through the vice president and the Speaker of the House, which you need a lot of behind the scenes power to make that happen. And then what do you end up with? Pete Buttigieg? This guy? I kind of I feel sorry for Biden. I'm appalled by Kamala Harris, and Nancy Pelosi should be in jail. But Pete Buttigieg, I think, makes me madder than any of the rest of them, because that guy he has a big job. He's the transportation secretary, and all the, the ports were clogged up, and the global supply chains were down. This guy was on maternity leave.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. If you have a big, important job that affects the rest of our lives, you hire a nanny and you get back to work. And that's all there is to it. That's not a gay thing or a gender thing. That is, if you have a job to do that is important to the country, then do it. And so, this guy made a statement by not doing it, and I'm sorry. Yeah.
Shows how useless he really is. Nobody missed him when he was gone anyway. I have to correct you. I think it was paternity leave, but we could leave that discussion to another time. Yeah. Well, they'll have to wait till after the midterms to make their move. But what I'm anticipating, go back to Nixon. Like, everyone thought Spiro Agnew is the vice president, next in line to become president. But once it was time for Nixon to go, they figured out a way to get rid of Agnew. And that's exactly what's going to happen with Harris. They don't care if it's a party change or not. In fact, I think at this point, they'd rather have a party change without an election, so they can keep the divisiveness up, but hopefully get somebody with a brain who can actually make things happen. Hey, it's just a conspiracy theory, but trust me, I remember, and you remember, when Nixon resigned, like a month before that, they indicted Spiro Agnew. No one saw that coming. Now, one thing I had read, another conspiracy rag that said that they told Nixon, you can have Agnew, but if anything ever happens to you, he will never serve as president. And maybe the same thing happened with Kamala Harris. I don't know, but I find the whole thing fascinating because there is going to be a change of power in this country without an election and without a coup, or without an obvious coup. And I want to know how they're going to do it, because They just can't allow things to go to 2024. There won't be a country or a world at the rate we're going. I mean, look at the Hunter Biden laptop saga. It was totally suppressed. 51 intelligence agents said it was Russian disinformation. Now the New York Times has had to admit, and the Washington Compost, that, oh, you know what? It really was his laptop, and the big guy could very well be Joe Biden, who's getting 10% or 50%, depending on the nature of the deal. I mean, we knew all this before the election, but they so wanted to get rid of Trump that they let this guy in and they suppressed all news. And that kind of brings us to Elon Musk buying almost 10% of Twitter, what that does to the information monopoly or oligopoly, the landscape. Is he going to permanently alter it?
Don't just survive, thrive. The Financial Survival Network.
Goldterra Resource Corp is a gold exploration company that has assembled a highly prospective district-scale land position on the doorstep of the city of Yellowknife in Canada's Northwest Territories. Goldterra is currently focused on expanding and delineating gold resources at the company's Yellowknife City Gold Project, with a goal of discovering over 5 million ounces. With ready access to infrastructure and multiple high-grade gold discoveries, Goldterra is on track to re-establishing Yellowknife as one of the premier gold mining districts in Canada. Goldterra trades as YGT in Toronto and YGTFF on the OTC. For more information, go to goldterracorp.com. That's goldterracorp.com.
This is the Financial Survival Network, the information you need to thrive now more than ever.
Well, yeah, Elon Musk spent the last couple of weeks talking about how the mainstream media and social media were censoring people unfairly, and we needed to get back to freedom of speech and stuff like that. And he just put some serious money where his mouth is, buying 11% of Twitter. That's a pretty big impulse buy. So if that means he intends to go through with making some changes in the media landscape, that would be awesome. Then we would have some serious power on the side of free speech, which we really don't now. It doesn't matter which political party we're talking about. It doesn't matter which mainstream media outlet we're talking about. They're all in favor of censoring ideas they don't like, which is a political and social catastrophe for us. If we're going to be censored out of existence in terms of a political discourse and a social discourse, then the country is not going to work anymore. You can't progress in a way that people will accept if all voices aren't heard. If things that are passed, laws that are passed, rules that are changed are just steamrolled over the objection of 48% or 52% of the population, then it's not legitimate. And that's where we are now. Like you said, the Hunter Biden thing. Okay, wait, let's take a couple steps back. I think Trump did two very consequential things during his 4 years. First of all, he named 3 conservative Supreme Court justices, which is a huge deal. Very few presidents get to name 3 Supreme Court justices. And the ones he named are kind of living up to billing, because sometimes a Supreme Court judge turns out to be different than the president. Yeah. And there are quite a few in the past that have been like that. But Trump's picks seem to be basically what he thought they would be. So he got that. That's a big deal. And the other thing Trump did was he broke the mainstream media. He turned most of the mainstream corporate media into basically just a branch of the Democrat Party because they were so freaked out by Trump's personality that they were willing to do anything, violate any journalistic norm in order to get rid of him. And this Hunter Biden laptop thing is a really astounding example of that because as Glenn Greenwald has said over and over again, it was possible at the time that the laptop emerged to check its veracity. And people did that, and it clearly lived up to the standards of what you would apply if you were a reporter when you were reporting on something. It was clearly legit, and yet the mainstream media just didn't want to hear it, and so they punted it until after the election. And that would have cost Biden the election, I think. I mean, because he's implicated. in those emails. It's got to give 10% to the big guy. Who's the big guy if it's not Joe Biden? So this was huge. It affected the course of a national election. And they still won't apologize for it. They now come out and they'll do news stories like, yes, these appear to be real emails, like they just discovered it themselves, like they're doing the digging and they're reporting honestly. And they don't mention the fact that they basically lied about it for 2 years. So big deal. But the lasting impact is that reasonable people can see that. And so they know that the mainstream corporate media can't be trusted. And you can trace this directly back to Trump. He made them the complete idiots that they have become. And they're going to be basically subsumed by better quality media going forward. Substack, your show, Jimmy Dore, Glenn Greenwald, Matt Taibbi. It goes on.
Dollar collapse.
Yeah.
Well,
my show too. Yeah, that's right. But anyhow, those outlets are attracting more and more people because they aren't always right, but they're trying to get it right. You can tell when somebody's honestly trying to figure out the truth. Or Joe Rogan, Russell Brand. There's a lot of guys out there who are doing this stuff, and trace this trajectory out for just a few more years. And in the aggregate, we will be bigger than CNN and MSNBC and Fox put together. So I think the trend is going in the right direction. And a big part of it is that people have just totally lost faith in the mainstream to tell them the truth.
So true. Hey, and going back, traditionally, the Washington Post is the voice of the CIA. We know that the Grahams were agents in the CIA or associates, whatever. Maybe they didn't carry badges that said they worked for the CIA, but we know they did. Dorothy Graham, was it, and her husband, who ran the Washington Post for decades. Was it
Ben Bartley or something like that?
Benjamin, no, it wasn't. But the Grahams, in any event, Ben Bradley, he was the editor during Watergate. But the Grahams were there's been a lot of stories about them and their association. And we know whenever the CIA is going to leak, they leak to the Washington Post, the same way the DOJ and the FBI, when they're going to leak, they leak to the New York Times. So this is just established fact. And basically, we're seeing both of them. So it's Katharine Graham, and she took over for her husband. I guess he passed away. It was the family's newspaper. And look, so these leaks about the laptop and all the Biden family crime, corruption, his brother's a crook, his son's a crook, fill in the blanks here. It's all coming now from established mainstream media sources, which means there's an agenda why it's being leaked. But I take confidence in the fact that the president says that he doesn't think Hunter did anything wrong.
Well, he obviously doesn't think Hunter did anything wrong because he was acting under Joe's orders. He enriched the family, which, with these crime families, the Clintons and the Bidens and the Trumps, there is morality, but it's a really tribal morality. It's like whatever you do for the family is okay. Whatever you do to hurt the enemies of the family, that's also okay. There's no hard and fast moral consistency. I'm sure that's the case with the Bidens. They are basically just a crime family who had one guy who managed to get elected to high office and then milked it for decades. And now it's finally coming out. This could easily, what would be really funny is if the Russiagate stuff leads back to Hillary Clinton at the same time that the Biden laptop stuff leads back to Joe Biden, and they do a dual perp walk. because they could,
Yeah.
if they just put them in the same car and then walk them into the same courthouse in handcuffs, that would be the best thing that could happen to the country, because it would finally show that crime doesn't always pay. And then, Jeff Bezos and Jamie Dimon, they're going to look at this and go, oh, you know what? Maybe I better clean up my act too. If we can do it to the president and the ex-secretary of state, maybe I'm vulnerable too.
I wouldn't count on it. Hey, but while we have this de facto digital tyranny in the United States, Canada wants to basically make their digital dictatorship statutory here. They're trying to pass a new law here.
What happened to Canada? that is, in my experience from visiting Canada, that is the nicest bunch of people on the face of the earth. Yeah. They're helpful, they're positive. How did they go crazy like this? You can understand Germany, something like that, or Russia becoming a dictatorship. Those cultures are kind of conducive to authoritarianism. But Canada, God, it's astounding what they're doing now. And yes, like you said, they're debating and not too far from passing a law that would require media outlets to emphasize the ideas and the stories that the government approves of, and de-emphasize the stuff that disagrees with government policy.
I know what Facebook and Google and Twitter do now.
Well, yeah, it's what we do already, right? But this would be just right out there. See, they're doing it in secret in the U.S. Well, they claim they're not doing it, and they look you in the eye and say, "No, we don't do anything like that." But in Canada, they're going to have the government say explicitly, "Yes, you have to do that," and then they'll look at the voters and say, "Yeah, we're telling the media to do this," and somehow they think that's okay. And the only way it can be okay is if 51% of the population thinks it's a good idea and is willing to vote for it to continue. And I'm not ready to accept that Canadians have drifted that far from what I thought they were. I still want to think they're really nice, reasonable people. So let's see how this goes.
I pray not. Hey, so going back to what we're talking about, the new ruble, it's a stalemate there now. Who's going to blink first? And this is what happens when you weaponize the financial system against your adversaries. You wind up undermining the primacy of the U.S. dollar and speeding its demise. And, Martin Armstrong always said it would happen around 2030, 2032, according to his computer model. He might be wrong about it. Let's go back, though. What does this do to the Fed? They're supposedly tapering and they're supposedly tightening, all these things. Rates are going higher. How much freedom are they really going to have to implement their will and bring the money supply and hopefully inflation into check? It looks like they're losing their ability to influence events.
Well, okay, there's several things in what you just said. I think the ruble thing is huge, potentially. And basically what Russia has done is they've said, okay, we want rubles in return for our natural gas exports to Europe, which means that Europe has to go out and buy rubles, which makes the ruble more valuable. And that happened. The ruble gained back all the foreign exchange, or the exchange rate losses that it suffered during the first part of the Ukraine war. So it's back to basically where it was to begin with on that one announcement. And the other thing it did was it said, we're going to buy gold, and we're going to price the gold that we're buying in rubles for a set amount of rubles. So effectively, they made the ruble a replacement for the petrodollar and put the ruble on the gold standard, a de facto gold standard, with just those two announcements. And that's a very big deal. It might not succeed because there's still a lot of moving parts in the whole Ukraine thing and the global economy and the sanctions and everything. But the fact that they did it means that it is now, it exists as a possibility on the geopolitical stage. And Russia and China have been preparing by buying tons of gold, literally tons of gold, hundreds of tons of gold, over the past couple of decades preparing for just this day when the U.S. So abused its reserve currency power that it forced other countries to look for an alternative. And so this is basically, it's part of the plan that was probably in place. Well, I think you're right. I think they expected it to happen later instead of sooner. But they're pulling out the plan that they had for 2028 or 2030 or whatever, and implementing it now. And that's a huge deal, because if other countries get the idea that this is okay, a way to strengthen their own currencies is to trade in those currencies. And all of a sudden, people don't need as many dollars out there in the world as they do now. And those dollars come back here to try and buy US assets. That would be hugely inflationary, which is to say it would devalue the dollar. So we would see a currency crisis of biblical proportions. It would be truly epic if $10 trillion tried to get back here and buy US-based assets. So we'll see, but we're setting the stage for something like that. Now, as for the Fed, they intend to raise interest rates some more. Even though the mortgage rates are at 5%, like we talked about before we went live. How much higher can mortgage rates go without blowing up the housing sector? And is that all it takes to knock us into a nasty recession? I think very probably, if house prices start to plunge, people start defaulting on their mortgages, because remember, the mortgages that got taken out in the last couple of years,
yes,
are at least the 30-year rates are fixed. But to the extent that anybody took out arms or anything like that, they're in big trouble going forward. And a lot of people were just barely able to afford the houses that they bought. So let there be a housing slowdown leading to a recession, and you're going to see kind of a cascade effect in the real estate market. Right. So that could be all that it takes. Just have mortgages go to 6%, and that's enough.
Maybe so. One thing we didn't mention, but we're remiss in not mentioning, is the yield curve inversion. It's inverted like totally from short term is now riskier than long term, right? Effectively, because rates are higher on the short end than the longer end. It doesn't always portend a recession, but most of the time it does. And as somebody else was telling me, maybe the inversion of the yield curve doesn't, but when you see unemployment at 3.6%, that always pretty much predicts a recession ahead.
Well, yeah. I mean, unemployment that low in the short run predicts higher wage growth, which is a form of inflation, which freaks the Fed out, which leads them to raise interest rates even more. And, there's a number out there on the 10-year treasury that blows up the global financial system. And we just have to see what that is. And every time it goes up, every time the Fed pushes interest rates higher, we get a little closer to that point. We're headed that way. This is very familiar, right? This is 1999 and 2006, all over again, where interest rates are going up in the face of price for perfection asset markets. Inflation is starting to rise because there are no new workers and companies are having to pay up to be fully staffed. And then boom, everything blows up. So, the idea that this is somehow different is, it is different, but it's different in bad ways. So this is different from those previous things in the sense that it's much worse. So when this comes, it's going to be astounding.
Couldn't agree more. Well, I think we've beat this horse dead for this week. John, go check out John's site, dollarcollapse.com, and sign up for both our newsletters, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Go to our site, sign up, because you can't afford to be caught flat-footed on this. It's happening really quickly, and it's happening on multiple fronts, economically, geopolitically, domestically, on the political scene, and in so many other things, societally, cancel culture, technologically. It's happening on every front here, John, and that's what's really amazing about the whole thing, and maybe makes it more interesting than any other conflagration in history.
It is, the one of the two or three good points about what's happening right now is that we're living through the most interesting financial period in history. So survive it and you'll be entertained.
Yeah. Otherwise, if you don't survive it, You'll be the entertainment.
Yes, that's right. The entertained and the entertainment. We have two groups in our society now.
Yeah, so be the ones who are entertained, and there's definitely ways you can work on it. Just read John's site and our site and just be prepared. John, we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, Kerry. See ya.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.